recognized. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman and Administrator. Honestly, you're hard not to like. I just don't like the agency you work for. I think.
I think that's a compliment.
I think it is a compliment.
That's as close as a compliment you're going to get from this
For
guy.
me, it's probably the best you're going to get. But I mean that sincerely, because I get the EPA's role, but it seems like the EPA just constantly looks back at old laws that were passed through the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and continue to rewrite them. And you continue to go after agents or industry over and over and over again, and not understanding actually the ad cost or what it does to downstream. Now, you say you take the economic impact, and you do take that into consideration, but you don't, because we continue to see the ad. I mean, what Senator Ricketts was just asking about the vehicles, you know, I did some quick research on it. I'll let him talk a little bit more about it. But the ad that is costing, you talk about trying to have, you know, better fuel efficiency, but yet the rule that you guys put on diesel trucks, which I drive every day, by making us put diesel exhaust fluid into it, it runs our gas mileage down and actually is worse for the environment. I mean, you see this stuff and it spills, it crystallizes all over the floor. You can remove it from a truck, which is illegal. I understand that. But you can take it off of a truck and you'll increase your gas mileage by 20, 30, and sometimes 50%. But you guys don't take that into consideration, but you still continue to push that. And now we have our, you know, the farm industry, which I'm a rancher. We have a cow-calf operation. And, you know, we see protein price going through the roof, and it continues to climb. And we have a hard time finding enough markets to go to right now. We have the meat packers that are pretty consolidated right now, as we see. We see the poultry consolidating faster for processing plants. We see the pork industry very consolidated. And yet now the EPA is coming out with new guidelines for ELG. And by your own admittance, you said that this is going to cause some plants to close. Is that good for the industry? Because on the other hand, you said you want to have, you guys have talked about wanting to have a more resilient meat and poultry and protein supply chain. How is this new proposed rule that you guys are running towards on your options for ELG, how's this positive for the cattle market? How's this positive for consumer when you see protein already spiking at higher prices than we have ever seen in the history of the United States? How is this positive for the consumer? How is this a positive move for the EPA to be making this move right now?
Well, I'll tell you that, number one, I hear you loud and clear, and we're listening to our farmers and our ranchers as we look at—
Are you, though?
Well, we haven't finalized the rule, and we've taken a look at what we're seeing in terms of these discharges and trying to eliminate some of the negative environmental impacts from these discharges. But as we look at the economic—
But hasn't industry did a tremendous job on already changing a lot of their discharge? I mean, they have gone a long ways in where they were at 50 years ago to where they're at today, and yet it's still not even kind of good enough. So are you really listening to them?
Well, I will tell you, you make a very good point. And when we look at these standards, we do have people, the majority of the people in the industry are performing, are doing well. So we're trying to create that level playing field to bring some of those who are not taking those additional investments to reduce
Minister,
that
then why wouldn't you just work with those individuals by themselves rather than making a new rule and affecting the entire industry? Because this is going to affect the entire industry, and this is going to add a tremendous amount of cost to every dinner plate and every breakfast plate and every sandwich served. I mean, already seeing prices because of minimum wage increase in California, where a hamburger at McDonald's is almost not going to be affordable. In 2013, people was laughing when I said, if we continue down this path, before long, you're going to be paying $20 for a hamburger at McDonald's. Is it so funny now? Because we're dang near there. And so this is going to add cost, sir, and you know it. This is going to add a tremendous amount of cost to protein when you could just work with a few of those bad apples rather than changing the entire industry on how they're discharging right now.
Well, the industry is moving forward and updating. So by law, we have to update our standards that match with where industry is going. And so in order to—
No, they're meeting your standards today, and you're moving the goalpost again.
Some of them, many of them are exceeding standards.
Well, great. Let them exceed. But why are you moving the goalpost? Why do you see the need to move the goalpost? Because you know, there's no way you can deny this. This is going to add cost to protein. Yes?
We have to update—
No. Is it or is it not?
We haven't finalized it, so I don't know.
You know it's going to.
I don't know the
Is it going to
answer
cost
that.
the upholstery in the meat industry? Is it going to cost them to upgrade and spend a tremendous millions of dollars?
When we have
The answer to that is yes.
we have to look at the benefits too. There are a lot of people who are benefiting from the industry actually moving forward and doing better.
Who is this benefiting from it?
Communities benefit from it.
The
When you look at the
communities,
water
you
contamination.
mean these same communities that's going to lose jobs when these industries shut down, these plants?
We have to balance that.
These same communities that you're saying are going to benefit, are these same industries just going to lose maybe the largest employer in their community because they can't afford to make the changes?
We're talking
So I'm
about
trying to
public
figure out
health
where you're saying
benefits.
communities are going to benefit.
We're talking
from
about the people that live in these communities that we recognize do work in these facilities,
Uh-huh.
but they're also drinking the water, they're breathing the air. We're trying to balance those public health benefits with the jobs and the economics. And many in the industry, as you have pointed out, are doing it the right way.
What
We have
about
to make
people
sure
that
that
can't
everybody-
Wait. Your time has expired. There's going to be a
Can
second
I have,
round.
can I have another
You could-
minute,
you
just
could
like
have-
you gave
Yeah,
Mr.
you can have
Kelly?
another round.
Well, you
go,
gave.
go ahead. No,
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you.
Take a minute.
Let me just ask this too. How do you explain this to the people right now that are struggling to put protein on the plates for their kids as they speak, or their families as they speak now, knowing that this is going to add cost? You know this is going to add the industry is predicting this could add 15 to 20% cost to protein. So how can you say this is a positive move for the country?
What I would tell them is we have a farming and ranching federal advisory committee and a new agricultural office that is advising me specifically on the impacts, the technologies available, and what this means to their community.
And none of them are raising cattle like we do in Oklahoma. None of your advisories are actually doing that. They're professionals that work in colleges and universities that have a tremendous amount of theory, but they've never got crap on their boots before.
I
yield
think
back.
I will challenge you on that and provide the details. We do have those who are farming and ranching on the federal advisory committee.
Okay. And you're willing to stay if you're willing.
Line comment across the total force.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Mullin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Harris, just, looking at you guys as reoptimizing, for the future powers ahead, right? You guys are making some changes to the training processes for your pilots, which is great. We've got new platforms, new technology we got to work on. But as you know, Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma and Vance Air Force Base, where Vance is one of the top pilot training centers in the country. Where are we at with changing those programs there, and where does it leave the Air Force bases? When you start talking about what's the future of Vance and what's the future of Altus in their current mission?
So I don't see the current missions changing. What I do see changing is as we look to reframe what a unit of action is and how we deploy, that will be different. And this is where we get into the in-place combat wings or the different types of combat wings that might be out there. There's still foundational things that we need to do within our Air Force that Air Education and Training Command does for us today. The changes that we're talking about under great power competition and the re-optimization for this really are aligning things like the accessions part of it, or onboarding of the warrant officers, and the other things that our chief has talked about in previous testimonies. As far as the bases and the missions and the roles and functions, specifically the institutional ones that are aligned to that, I don't see those changing.
Well, in Vance, I have a concern because you're changing a lot of your flight time to simulators, which is, at first, to be quite frank with you, General Harris, I was thinking, how are you taking someone with the actual flight time to a simulator, and then your instructors down there actually spent time with me and said, listen, we can put these pilots now in situations where they might have a 5% survivability rate because of a mechanical error. We can put it in the simulator over and over and over and over again, and we're going to see an increase of that survivability rate, in which I thought, okay, I totally understand that now, right? I'm not a video game guy at all. I didn't ever even won Mario Brothers way back when on Nintendo, and so that's just not my world. But when you start looking at the simulators and the way they're training, I totally understand it. But some of the simulators you guys have set up at Vance is literally in a warehouse. I was in there in the middle of the summer, and wow. I mean, this warehouse was 100 degrees all day long, if not over. And these future pilots are set in these simulators for hours. And so I don't see the infrastructure meeting where you guys are moving towards. You're just taking them and putting stuff there, and I don't see the investment. I definitely don't see it when you're going to your budget that the Air Force put out. I didn't see anything new for Vance to be able to meet the new training that you guys are asking them to do, except using old infrastructure. So can you speak of that?
Senator, I can speak to part of that. So in terms of great power competition and the reoptimization, you won't see money associated with any of the efforts that we're making into this one. Large part of that is the work is ongoing, and we're still uncovering what it's going to take to be able to do this effectively. And FSRM and some of these facilities will be one of them. The joint simulation environment is another piece of this. But it also speaks to a broader piece of the ranges in general and how we train and practice every day, and the modernization that's going to need to keep all those together.
Well, go ahead, Jeremy.
Senator, I'm not tracking the issue that you're talking about, Vance, but I understand the concern. Let us take this for the record and come back to you and give you a more cogent discussion on this.
And let me explain this one too. I'd love to invite you guys there. We take a lot of pride in Vance, and it's something that the community is 1,000% behind. It's something that the state's behind. We love the fact that there's more pilots trained there than any place in the country. We want to keep that there. So, with that being said, I'm a hands-on type of guy. I want to see it. So we would love to make that invite. I will personally make sure I change my schedule to fit your all schedule if anybody wants to come down there and put eyes on it.
Yes, sir. We would love to do that. I'm not tracking this particular issue, but we'll take it for the record.
They're not complaining to me. I picked it up.
Yes, sir.
They've never brought it to me and said, hey, we need to look at this. I just thought if we're talking about retaining the best, sometimes conditions do matter.
Yes, sir. Fair.
Real quick before I run out of time, and I hated to spend so much time on that, but Secretary Hunter, we got a problem at Tinker with providing our mission when we have an overrun of the E7s while we're phasing out the E3s. And I've brought this up multiple times, and we get answers that go all over the place on how we're going to actually phase out the E3s when we can't deliver the E7s on time and still be mission capable. We talk about utilizing space assets, which that's a possibility, but what are we actually going to do to make sure the mission that Tinker does, and we know Tinker provides a very vital role to us, and especially in a time of conflict, if we go into an eventual fight, they're going to be our eyes and our ears, and yet we're not going to have the platforms to provide the mission. What's our actual plan? Are we going to plan on just keeping some of the E3s around because they're phasing out pretty quick before we get the E7s?
So our plan is to have E7 as a replacement, and we are on contract with Boeing.
But way behind and flies over budget.
So we have been executing on the work. What we've been behind on is we got a proposal from Boeing that was roughly twice what the budgeted funding was. Funds that were budgeted based originally on information from Boeing about what the cost was going to be. I can tell you we have narrowed that gap quite considerably, and into an area where I believe we will soon have an agreement that will be something that is affordable for the taxpayer, affordable for the Air Force, and we'll be able to definitize that contract with Boeing and know how that rapid prototyping program, which is what we're currently engaged in, is going to work over the next several years. Then the issue, and where we have seen some changes in our plans that you're referencing accurately, is how do we move into production of those aircraft that we've taken through that prototyping process. And that is where there have been some delays, because not knowing that we had a design that was affordable, we could not in good conscience budget for production of an aircraft that we didn't yet have a design that we knew was going to work. So we will be able to revisit the issue of what is the pace and tempo of E7 production once we have that agreement reached with Boeing.
Thank you. General Wars, I think, is wanting to weigh in on this, but I'm out of time. So, Chairman, it's up to you.
Go ahead. Sir, you said the E3 would be our eyes and ears. I think we all have to be honest about what the E3 actually provides. The physics of the E3 does not permit it to function in the highly contested environment. Nothing that we can do to upgrade the airplane will change a 10-second revisit rate. It won't change the range. It won't change the resolution, which allows it to see what we need. The mission computer in an E3 weighs 25,000 pounds. Mm-hmm. It is powered by TF-33 engines. We did an extensive amount of research in the B-52 upgrade program to determine how long those engines were sustainable. And there are some heroics that could get some of those engines past 2030, but for all intent and purposes, 2030 is the end of the road for the TF-33 engine. So we are working, as Mr. Hunter said, as quickly as we can to bring the E7 on, but the E3 is not a part of the fight in the highly contested environment. That doesn't mean it doesn't have use in other AORs and in other regions, Homeland Defense in particular, but it is not a part of the fight in the highly contested environment.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. Thanks, Warren. Senator Mullin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dalton, I did enjoy visiting with you and actually all three of you all in the office. And I asked you this question while you were in there, and I would like for you to be as precise as possible. Could you please explain in roughly 60 seconds why you're qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force?
Senator, I have a deep appreciation for our service members, and though I have not worn the uniform myself, I have been on the same team with them since I was 22 years old, and I have family members that have also served. If confirmed, I would work with officers and enlisted leaders to ensure that we're providing the best possible care and support for our airmen and guardians that they certainly deserve. I also wanted to share just a very short story. In 2010, when I was a career civil servant, I turned down an opportunity at the White House to serve on the National Security Council to deploy as a civilian advisor to Afghanistan because I believed that's where my country needed me the most at that time. And as a defense civilian, I thought it was important to understand what it was like to work in an operational command in wartime. In my over 20 years in defense, I have learned that civil-military dialogue is vital to provide the best possible options and potential solutions to the
Right.
Secretary of Defense and the
Ma'am,
President. And in
what I'm
our
trying to-
democracy, Senator, we are
Ma'am, what I'm
fortunate to
trying to
have
do here
civilian
is-
oversight of the
okay.
military.
Listen, I'm trying to give you as much leeway as possible for you to describe why you're qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force. Understanding the duties, and I'll read it pretty plain here, the duties and responsibilities responsible for the affairs of the Air Force, Space Force, including organizing, training, equipping both services for the welfare of approximately 700,000 active duty guards, reserves, civilian, and personnel, oversees an annual budget of more than $173 billion in direct strategies, policy development, risk management, purchasing of weapons, technology investment, and human resource management. I'm just looking for qualifications. You didn't give me any qualifications. You gave me your history, your story. But what makes you qualified to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force? We're at a serious, critical time right now in this country. And we need the best and the brightest. And I'm sure you're great, and I'm sure you're extremely bright. But are you the best to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force? I don't see it. That's no stab at you. I'm just saying that at a time when we're trading over transitions from future fighters, from aircraft, from weapons systems. We're getting transition out of the war of terror, going into conventional warfare. We're behind in a lot of systems that we're trying to get to. The Air Force plays a pivotal role in this. The National Guard is getting divested of aircraft on a daily basis with nothing in reserve for them to be able to pick up. That's a direct reflect to our homeland. And the Undersecretary is going to be involved in all this with decision-making. And I'm having a very hard time to see your qualifications on this. This is why I gave you time to explain it. And you go into a story about being on the same team and about, you turned down a position to another political position to be able to run in and do, to be, sent to Afghanistan, which I don't undermine that at all. I just don't see how that makes you qualified. That doesn't make you a bad person. I just don't think you're the best person for the job right now. And that's what we're looking for right now. We're trying to recruit the best and the brightest men and women to join our armed services to begin with. We need to know that they had the best and the brightest leading them too. And unfortunately, I don't feel like that's you. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullin. Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Senator Mullin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I just want to make an observation here, and this is not trying to be confrontational to you at all. You've had enough of that. I don't really feel like doing that today. I haven't ate, so I'm trying to be in a good mood. But I just say, first of all, you mentioned a while ago as a bragging point that you're battling the Houthis, a terrorist organization. You call that success when they don't even have a Navy. If we wanted to eliminate them, we could. If we wanted to just stop what they're doing, we could. By holding them back for 6 months, but yet they're still disrupting and still have the ability to attack shipping freighters, that's not a win. That's far from a win. We're the United States Navy, and we were, at one time, the largest Navy, but we've succeeded that to China, which goes back to what Eric Schmidt was saying about the idea of the climate being the biggest threat to China. I really don't think China is too concerned about the environment at this point. In fact, they're laser focused on us. And in fact, they're running circles around us. In fact, as you know, Mr. Secretary, they have the largest Navy in the world now. They built 30 ships last year alone. We barely completed 2. That's a problem, don't you think?
That is a problem.
That's a huge problem. Yeah, we're retiring 50. According to your all's records, you guys have roughly 50 that you're going to retire or have to go in for maintenance. It's going to be out of service by 2028. We have 292 ships currently on the fleet. Not all of them are actually at sea. They had 370. I'm sure they're laser focused on the environment. Our concern is, are we safer today than we were? The answer is that is probably not. Probably not. Because we're trying to balance the environment with world power. And your body language would just, honestly, just aggravate people just by the way you're behaving. And I mean that sincerely, because you don't take it serious. In fact, it's serious to us, and you almost joke and laugh about it with your body language. And I'm just saying, as a constructive criticism, that could be a problem, because we want you to succeed. The last thing I want you to do is not to succeed. But even when you was pressed by Senator Scott over here, Rick Scott, you made a reference to the last the last administration, why you're in the situation you're in today, because they had something under bid. But yet we have current things that are constantly coming under bid. You've been in position for how long now?
2.5 years, Senator.
2.5 years. How long has this administration been in place?
About 3.
I think it's time to start owning your own responsibilities and still blaming the previous administration. And yet you sit there and you go, nah. That's the problem. Sir, it's not that we're just trying to be confrontation with you. It's that I don't think you're hearing us. It's like, you know best. We're just senators up here and we have no opinion. That's a problem. And so if you want to try getting along so we can all get in the same boat and row together, then let's have a serious conversation about actually moving forward and what our priorities are. The navies need to be focused on winning fights. Let the EPA worry about the environment. Now, switching gears totally. Admiral, good to see you. I want to talk a little bit about Genesis. And I say this because we're having serious recruiting issues. I mean, I had a conversation this morning with three people that their sons were all trying to get in the service. One is a D1 track athlete. Waited 8 months to finally get in, and they were giving him a hard time because of Genesis, because he's broke a leg or two. There was some other one that had some health concerns from his past when he was a little kid, and he actually dropped out after 6 months of trying to be in. By the way, all these are D1 athletes. Another individual had some issues with their shoulder, still competing, but couldn't get in the service. And I just kind of go around. I mean, I was a pretty rambunctious kid. I broke a lot of bones. And I would believe that most boys that they haven't at least broke some bones probably didn't live a good life growing up, because you got to push yourself. My son currently is a D1 wrestler for Oklahoma State. Got cleared to wrestle internationally, got cleared to wrestle by USA, by NCAA wrestling, and he has having a hard time getting cleared in because he's supposed to report to boot camp this summer, and yet he hasn't got cleared yet. I'm not bringing it up for my son if you're doing anything. I'm just saying, is Genesis actually helping us? Because they start looking at an accident he had when he was 7 years old when he got bucked off of a horse and he broke his arm. And they asked him a question about it. 7 years old, broken arm. Is it really working? I mean, I understand what Genesis is trying to do. I get that. But at some point, is it getting in the way to help us recruit, or is it actually hindering our ability to recruit?
Well, thank you. And, we've had a lot of discussions about Genesis. Actually, all of the service chiefs and OSD working with the DHA, which is the owner of the system, to provide this kind of feedback of where it is potentially slowing things down. And I think, just in my time as the CNO, that we've made some definite improvements in streamlining the process, in reducing the amount of times people have to go back and get paperwork. And DHA continues to take this feedback. And I will provide this feedback right now as well to them as we continue to move that process forward. So I think, it's a little bit of growing pains with the new system. We're really committed to working with DHA to make sure that it does what it needs to do to get us our recruits into the system as quickly as possible. So again, I would like to get with your staff offline on those because it's always good to have examples.
Right.
Because it helps illustrate exactly where some of the holdups are.
We'd love to
and the
work with you on it.
reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullin. Senator Cotton, please.
Admiral Franchetti, I want to start